Good afternoon and warm greetings to one and all present here. Thank you all for being here today for this enlightening and informative panel discussion titled Litigating Elections in India, organized by Bangalore Legal Forum. The Bangalore Legal Forum is a monthly panel series hosted at the Bangalore International Centre, jointly organized by Manipal Law School along with National Law School of India University, St. Joseph's College of Law, superheaded by Professor Saraswat Esther Thomas, Dean of Manipal Law School. The forum seeks to build a collaborative legal community in the city by fostering knowledge sharing between academia and the legal industry, while also promoting public awareness and access to meaningful legal discourse. Let me kindly take this opportunity to introduce the esteemed dignitaries and guests for today's discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce Sri Alok Prasanna Kumar, co-founder at Vidhi Karnataka, a renowned legal scholar and public intellectual. He is widely respected for his expertise in constitutional law, the judiciary, judicial reform, urban development, and law and technology. An alumnus of Nalsa University and the University of Oxford. His insight has shaped public discourse through his writings in Economic and Political Weekly, leading law journals and national media outlets such as The Hindu and the Indian Express. With experience practicing before the Supreme Court and Delhi High Court, he continues to engage critically with questions of democracy and governance as co-host of Janatantra podcast. He truly stands as one of the most thoughtful voices of India's constitutional and judicial landscape. We welcome you, sir. We are delighted to present Dr. Harish Narasappa, a designated senior advocate, one of the most eminent legal minds in India. He is the founding partner of Samvat Partners, a major law firm with extensive national coverage, and also the founder of DAKSH, a non-profit working on governance and accountability in India. He has close to 20 years of experience in corporate practice, mergers and acquisitions, private equity, dispute resolution, and regulatory practice. He has regularly appeared in courts and tribunals around the country. Dr. Narasappa is an academician having a PhD, a BA LLB Honours in National Law School of India University, a BCL in University of Oxford, where he was a Radhakrishnan scholar, and a BA in Philosophy in the University of London. His scholarship and history of litigation, work in a variety of fields, qualifies him as an important voice on the topics of democracy, governance, and elections in India. We welcome you, sir. We are honored to introduce Sri B.T. Venkatesh, a highly respected human rights lawyer and activist. Based in Bengaluru, he has devoted over 4 decades to championing the cause of marginalized communities, including Dalits, women, children, and LGBTQ individuals, often through pro bono legal services. A former state public prosecutor for the Karnataka High Court, he has consistently used his legal expertise to defend civil liberties and strengthen democratic values. His tireless commitment has earned recognition both in India and abroad. He truly stands as a crusader for the voiceless. We welcome you, sir. And our esteemed moderator for today's discussion, Reverend Father Harry Terry. He is a distinguished Jesuit priest from the Karnataka province, India. He serves as a faculty member and finance officer at St. Joseph's College of Law, Bengaluru, where he has been instrumental in fostering academic excellence and holistic development among students. Known for his guidance, dedication, and deep commitment to education, Father Terry brings a wealth of experience and insight to every discussion he moderates. Today, we are honored to have him as a moderator, and we look forward to his valuable guidance and perspectives. We welcome you, Father. Ladies and gentlemen, we are truly privileged to have such distinguished experts with us today, whose insight and experience will provide us with a deeper understanding of the legal, constitutional, and electoral landscape in India. I would also like to thank A special gratitude to Professor Sarasu Esther Thomas for her leadership in making this initiative possible. I now invite them to share their perspectives and engage with us in this discussion.
So good evening, dear friends. We have eminent persons in front of us to deal with a very important issue or aspect of our constitution and the very existence of our identity as a nation. I'm sure all of us are here on the right time, right context, and right moment. I'm not asking whether you have come to the wrong hall, but rather I'm asking, or I'm speaking about the right context of the election issues that is going on around across India. So therefore, I'm sure this discussion is going to be really nourishing, enriching, and very fruitful for all of us. So I would like to begin with the little introductory note to how to go about with regard to this discourse, and later we'll open the floor for our panelists to speak about their views and their expertise with regard to the topics, and later we'll move ahead with the interaction with the panel. So dear friends, it is my privilege to welcome you for this discourse on a theme that is not only constitutional in spirit but also very foundational to the very republic of ours. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru once said in the Constituent Assembly, that is on the December 6th, 1946, as he was speaking about the objective resolution, as he was proposing that. He said, we are aiming at democracy and nothing less than democracy is this. This was basically, he was speaking about that government derives its power and authority from the people. So, when our framers of the constitution sat down to draft the constitution, they were acutely aware that political democracy, the act of choosing our representatives, would mean little without strong institutions to safeguard the process. And also in the Fundamental Rights Subcommittee's first draft, that was in the year, April 3rd, 1947, that was in the process of drafting the constitution, this Fundamental Rights Subcommittee mentioned or wanted to put this free and fair election as part of the fundamental rights. And it was also later in the second draft also that was found. That is in the year 1947 again, but April 16th, within few days, when the second draft was presented, even there it was mentioned that they were very clear that with regard to election and franchise, adult franchise should be in fundamental rights. And later, Ambedkar also was very, very vehement when he said, in his opinion or in his thoughts, that it should find place in fundamental rights. But unfortunately, it was not found there. But later, we see a separate, you can say, a election code as such that is found in the Constitution, Article 324 to 329, that we see. And Article 324 in particularly vests the ultimate power to the Election Commission of India with regard to superintendence, direction and control of the entire election mechanism. So therefore, it is very, very, very much stressing on this aspect of elections, which is very basis for the democracy, as Jawaharlal Nehru also was trying to put it, and also Ambedkar also was stressing. And later, we gradually see that Election Commission is considered as a guardian of Indian democracy. And they do it in multiple ways by ensuring that there is a free and fair election and curbing the misuse of money power, muscle power. And also when you look at the courts, they too have been custodians of this democracy through maintaining this electoral integrity. We have the cases like Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narain in the year 1975, where when the executive power was trying to immunize the prime minister's election and from the judicial scrutiny, but we see how courts come alive. And later we also see in the recent times, PUCL versus Union of India in the year 2003, where the court read into Article 19, Clause 1, where right of voters to know the criminal antecedents of candidates was very much stressed. So therefore, everyone has the right to know which candidate or what kind of candidates that we are electing. And later we have the electoral bond case, where again we can see the Supreme Court how proactive it was. And recent in the year 2023 in appointment process of election commissions, there again court was being very, very proactive. But of course, unfortunately, the parliament undid the whole process. But still, court was doing its duty. So therefore, now let's open the whole discourse to our panelists. So I am sure they will deal with this aspect of money and electoral bonds, the debate around transparency and accountability in political funding, which still remains unsettled, though we had the famous case of the electoral bond case. Technology and elections, this is again another topic for discussion that is very relevant these days with regard to EVM and various other things, and especially the social media, how political parties try to influence and maneuver this whole aspect of election and putting across their ideology and their manifesto. Criminalization of politics, this is another important topic which we need to really go into, and I'm sure they will do that. Then the federal dimensions, the role of ECI in state elections, delimitation exercises, often we see how that can be manipulated with regard to electoral vote bank and all that, how executives try to do that. And the judicial interventions, should courts actively step into the electoral domain, or would that risk judicial overreach? So this is another question that we need to look into. So finally now I open the floor for them to explore these topics. So welcome you, sirs, for this wonderful time of discourse. Minutes for each speaker. So you can speak, then later we'll get into the discourse. So it is open for anyone to begin.
Thank you. I think that's a very wide area that you have mentioned. And I'll restrict myself to about 3 specific things which I have written about and which I have commented on. Number 1, I think, is the appointment of election commissioners. I think this is an issue which we react to rather than think proactively. Number 2 is this exercise of the special intensive revision that has been taking place in Bihar. What are the challenges and what is the court's intervention leading to? And number 3, and this is something which is looking forward, and this is some work which we have done at Vidhi, which is about delimitation and why delimitation could make or break the Indian Union. So to start, I think first with the appointment of election commissioners. Sometimes constitutions can become irrelevant. This is a controversial thought, but I'll put it out there for people to think about. That the economic, social, political conditions in which a constitution was framed changes so dramatically that they risk becoming irrelevant unless they're amended. This is what has happened with our appointment process for election commissions. We've had a process for well over 70 years where the government just picked the election commission. No one can say that India has never had a free and fair election in its 70 years just because central government picked the election commissioners. Indira Gandhi famously picked the election commission under whose aegis the election which she lost power happened. And since then, at least half the governments have been voted out through elections conducted under the control and supervision of election commissioners appointed by their own government. So it's not as if the process itself was problematic. What has changed is how deeply partisan our politics have got. Or rather, how it has become a genuine two-party or two-alliance system, where you cannot, where the parties are so divided, they see very little in common with each other, and elections becomes a winner-takes-all kind of game. The Supreme Court, to its credit, recognized this problem much earlier in the context of, say, the appointment of the CBI governor, the CVC governor, where they said there should be a role for the leader of the opposition. They were starting to recognize it. But with the constitution, you can't just add words there and hope the problem will go away. We have seen that in the context of the collegium system, just simply adding stuff there hasn't changed the fact that appointments are still deeply in the hands of the government. This is where I think, while, and you rightly said, it was well-intentioned, but it was never going to work because Parliament simply passed a law. Parliament simply passed a law where they said this is how the Chief Election Commissioner will be appointed, the leader of opposition will be in the minority, and that's it. So this is where I think it calls on us to accept and understand this reality that going forward, what earlier system worked for generally free and fair elections may not work going forward. That we may need to find a way of bridging this partisan divide in our politics. And it's there. We can't do away with it. It's going to be there with us for better or worse for another 25, 50 years. How do we not fundamentally let it affect our guarantor institutions, as they're called? The Election Commission, the CVC, the CBI, the CAG, the UPSC. It was assumed when the constitution was framed that government will find non-partisan, impartial people, and by and large they did. But that was in a different political context. To understand the political context has changed. So maybe this calls for us to think about not just procedural fixes, but somewhere the constitution perhaps needs to lay down, this is who gets to be a CEC. Like we have criteria for who can be a Supreme Court judge, who can be a High Court judge. It can no longer be just left to the government to decide. There will need to be, like whatever is passed as law, perhaps we may have to encode into the constitution, but also giving more space, giving more weight to the voice of the opposition. And similarly, we have to replicate this in the context of the State Election Commission. Everybody forgets the State Election Commissions, which are in charge of conducting panchayat and municipal elections, which people in Bangalore seem to have forgotten that happens, because we haven't had one. But I think this imagination is needed, that we need to accept this new reality and make this change in our constitution, which accounts and accommodates this difference without letting it break these institutions. Because the danger is if we sort of turn it into a winner takes all, it is going to become even more entrenched. This opposition is going to become even more entrenched. This difficulty in getting a non-partisan election commissions is going to get even more entrenched. So that was the first thing. In the context of the Bihar SIR, I think Supreme Court, I won't say the Supreme Court's intervention is useless. I think they have, mitigated at least a couple of the bigger significant problems with the SIR exercise. I think the two orders, one which sort of said that accept Aadhaar, accept ECI, and the most recent order which said that you have to make all the rolls public, or the second most recent order which said that. They've mitigated some of the serious problems with the way the SIR exercise was being conducted. But I don't think the court has really understood what that exercise is about. And it's unfortunate that they have taken the route of pragmatism instead of the path of principle. Now, the path of principle would make you ask the most fundamental question, and as we as lawyers, which we always ask, what is the legal basis for this exercise? The rules, the conduct of election rules provides for an intensive revision. They provide for a more summary kind of revision. There are three kinds of revision of roles which are well known to law. You cannot invent a new kind of revision and say this is special intensive revision. And the reason why I personally feel the Election Commission has invented this new role, this new exercise, is because all the other electoral roll revisions are done with the idea of inclusion. Whereas this seems to have been done with the idea of exclusion. If you recall, the SIR was basically started off to try and quote unquote weed out foreigners who have gotten their names on the electoral rolls. Turns out, big surprise, there are no actual foreigners on the rolls. Nobody's been able to provide a single instance of where somebody who's not a citizen of India has gotten on these rolls. But what has happened is that a lot of Indian citizens have found themselves excluded. Let's not come to the issues of why are there 50 people on the same residence. Let's not come to the issue of how are people into. That happens in every single electoral roll in this country. Right? Any electoral roll you pick, you'll find those errors. Which should prompt us to ask the deeper question, why is the Election Commission focusing on this exclusionary exercise? Which is what the court, I believe, failed to ask that question of the ECI. They just assumed that this exercise is like any other electoral revision exercise and we should just let them do it, but fix the problems along the way, Which, again, maybe because of the court's intervention, maybe because of media scrutiny, maybe because of active political parties, not too many legitimate citizens may be excluded from it. That just means that the exercise has failed. It doesn't mean that voter rights have been protected. So this is where I feel the court has yet to sort of ask that deep question, which I think we're going around in circles and saying accept this document, accept that document, but that's not the core issue in the SIR case. And that is where I feel the court still needs to address it. Finally, I'll come to the delimitation issue, and this is one where I think the court has no role to play whatsoever. As a lawyer saying that, it's very rare, it's very difficult. But delimitation in India currently has no role for the court to play, simply because we have no principles on the basis of, no statutory principles or constitutional principles on the basis of which we draw constituency boundaries. There are two very broad principles. As many, almost all constituencies should have almost as many number of voters as any other constituency would have. But that's subject to exceptions. One huge exception found within the constitution is for small states with a population of less than 6 million. But nowhere does the constitution mandate, and rather this is unfortunately where we amended the constitution to take away the decadal census from being involved in this exercise. We have now gotten to the absurd situation. Forget going to any other part of the country. Let's look at Bangalore. Let's look at the assembly constituencies in Bangalore. Rajarajeshwari Nagara has 600,000 voters. Beatrayanpura has 5.5 lakh voters. Mahadevpura has a very popular constituency of late, has 6 lakh voters. And it's not because anybody is trying to do malfeasance here. It's simply because we did not do what should have been the most normal thing to do in any democracy, which is redraw the boundaries of constituencies as and when population changes take place. Now, Bangalore has seen explosive population growth, but we have still not changed our constituency boundaries in 17 years. You've got absurdities where a Shivaji Nagara or a Shivaji Nagara or a Jayanagara constituency have 1.6, 1.5 lakhs. So you have some constituencies which are 4 times larger than other constituencies. That's absurd. That is still a smaller problem, which is a more readily solvable problem, which can be easily fixed by saying every delimitation from now onwards will happen on time, exactly 10 years after every census. But the bigger problem, and this is how I frame this problem, India is perhaps the only democracy, or at least it calls itself a democracy, where the poorer parts of the country are less represented in Lok Sabha than the richer parts of the country. The richest parts of India, by going by a per capita GDP basis, are Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, to an extent Kerala. All these states have more MPs than their population should permit. The poorest parts of India, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand have, and to an extent MP, have far fewer MPs than their population would permit. These calculations have been done by Milan Vaishnav of Carnegie. Takshashila and a lot of other institutions have redone these calculations based on population and projection and so on. But this is unsustainable. This is the unfortunate result of delaying delimitation for more than 5 decades now. No democracy will survive very long if this continues. Either there will be internal pressures where large-scale population movements will take place, and nobody has conclusively established this, but I suspect that the lack of economic development might have something to do. We don't know exactly. Maybe somebody will do the research and prove me wrong. The lack of representation in Lok Sabha. We think UP and Bihar are huge states, but actually, compared to their population, they're not as represented. But this cannot continue. This has to be rectified. We needed a delimitation yesterday. If you are getting it tomorrow, that is good. You will have to redo the constituency boundaries, the number of MP constituency per state, according to population and population alone. There may be some mitigating factors like number of voters to ensure that the shock isn't too great, that suddenly Tamil Nadu doesn't lose 1/3 of its seats overnight. But that exercise has to be done today. There has to be no further freeze on this delimitation. And the sooner we do this, the more equitable it will be for the country, the stronger our democracy will be. So I'll stop there and I'll hand over.
Okay, I think the topic, and I was curious when Bhaskar told me the topic was litigating elections. And I think Alok and the father have set the context for litigation. So, and also explain without stating it, what are the different stages of an election. You know, there is the issue of whether you have a fundamental right to vote. I think we'll leave it for another day, because that, you know, requires a deeper analysis. And I think it's very flawed to think that we don't have a right to vote. I mean, we are a democracy, so it just goes with that. But many of the problems that have been touched upon so far, I think, are linked to the enforceability of rights in connection with an election. And then it's linked to, you know, the lack of capacity in enforcing, both from a judicial perspective and also from an executive perspective. Okay, so let's just take different stages of an election. What are the kinds of litigation that should happen? What is happening? And what are the possible conclusions? The most common form of litigation around elections that most lawyers know is you challenge somebody winning an election after the election is over. That's the most common form. It's called election petition. Normally it's the candidate who's come second who challenges, and then he makes a set of allegations and then goes on. Recently, in the last 15-20 years, by the time the court declares an election valid or invalid, the 5-year term is over. Okay, so that kind of litigation has become meaningless. And that is a combination of both the winning candidate's ability to draw out that litigation and the judiciary's lack of capacity to appreciate many of the issues that are coming up today. And this, is something that we haven't examined. Then, sticking to the conduct of elections itself, since we're talking about challenging so you can't challenge any election from the time the process starts, once the election commission notifies the election, and then until the declaration of results, nobody can go to court. Okay, so we should not forget that. So you have to hold your horses, right, until after the election results are announced. So litigation there is, so there's no proactive litigation that you can do. So any litigation has to be prior to the notification and after the declaration of results. And that means that your ability to intervene in issues that are extremely critical is limited. And there is a lot of logic to this because, given how litigious we are and given how courts are, I think then no election will be complete if you permit, litigation during elections. Okay. Then the second statement, right, that we need to remember, Alok mentioned, free and fair elections in another context. And in one sense, I think, we do have free and fair elections. But in another sense, I think there's only one body that believes that elections are truly free and fair. That's the Election Commission of India. Nobody else believes it. Why is that? And it's not a question of, saying, oh, we're not a democracy. That's not the point. There are certain rules that the Election Commission has framed. And it is followed in violation by every candidate. Just take, how much of money you spend in an election. It's the most nonsensical limits, and it's failure to recognize, the reality of elections in India. So today, poor people, middle class people, professionals can't contest elections on their own. Unless you have, even for an MLA election, Alok mentioned small constituencies like Jayanagar, Rajajinagar in Bangalore. I mean, people who are the top three parties, political parties say, if you have about 25 crores, then come and seek a ticket. Right? That is the amount of money that is required to contest elections. Now, what is the Election Commission's limit? Depending on the size of the constituency for an for legislative assembly election, it ranges between 30 lakhs to 45 lakhs. It to what, 50? Improved from about 12. I remember when we started something called the Bangalore Political Action Committee, we started with great idealism and high hope. We said we have to remove black money from elections. So we said we will fund through checks. No candidate was interested. They were only interested in endorsement. They said, sir, dudde no beda, 12 lakhs we'll manage. 12 lakhs, how much can you give? You'll give 1 lakh. Right? So this is and who believes that this is, what people are spending? So how can anybody say with a straight face that elections are free and fair? They're not free and fair in that context, right? The second thing is this criminal, candidature. There I think it's more to do with the people. I mean, we forget when we are pressing the button that we are pressing the button for a rapist, right? And, this is not just our country, right? I mean, the US, the beacon for rule of law, elected an acknowledged, a person who's been found by a court of law to have been guilty of sexual misconduct, correct? So, I think so, and how do you litigate? So leave out let's come back to the topic. So how do you litigate these things? Right? So how many voters can go and challenge an election after the election is over on the basis that the winning candidate may have spent more money than what the Election Commission mandated? How will the individual be able to obtain that information? Right? It's an impossible task. The losing candidate, if he challenges the election, will not challenge on this ground because he will also have spent more. Right? So who is the loser? The loser is the voter. So we don't know how to litigate this. And this is a serious issue that we need to consider because this is going to only exacerbate over the years. And issues are becoming more and more complicated. Right? The other thing, for example, one of the other rules is you have to, also disclose your, criminal records, educational qualifications. So there's an affidavit that every candidate files. If that affidavit is false, then that's a ground for declaring you, if you're won, then that's a ground for declaring the election invalid. Now that it's a it's a protect the politicians club amongst themselves, right? They will not challenge each other on certain things which they themselves will be guilty of, right? So that leaves the burden on the voter. And I think it's worth studying as to the number of election petitions that have been filed. How many have been filed by voters and how many have been filed by losing candidates? The number of I suspect the number of petitions filed by voters are extremely low, because it's a uphill task to go and find, the information. In fact, you need to make friends with the winning candidates' opponents in his or her own party to get information. That's how we will know whether it's happening. So that is something we need to remember. Now, electoral rolls. This is another challenge, right? So we have not, because there is no fundamental right to vote. If you are wrongly excluded from the electoral rolls, you cannot challenge the election itself. The finalization of the electoral rolls are divorced from the conduct of elections. See, because the SIR is about whether you are on the roll or not whether you will actually vote or not. Right? You may be on the rolls, you may choose not to vote. That's a separate issue. But because courts have been shy of declaring the right to vote as a fundamental right, there's a very passing reference in Justice K.M. Joseph's judgment recently in the context of appointment of election commissioners, which has been overruled, or rather reversed, not overruled, reversed by the parliament in terms of how commissioners are appointed. So what can we do? And so since 2007, almost prior to every assembly or parliamentary election or even legislative council election for graduates, we have gone to court in Karnataka. Somebody or the other has gone to court saying that there's a problem with the way electoral rolls are being revised and maintained. And we get some orders from the court which are very good on paper, which says, oh no, we'll come down strongly, you follow up, whatever. But the staying power of an individual citizen to ensure that there are clean electoral rolls is very, very limited. Right? You can't fight the system so much. So political parties need to get involved. And it's only in this, because the Bihar SIR, because of the, as Alok rightly pointed out, it's an exclusion revision rather than an inclusion revision, that political parties are taking it seriously. Otherwise, at least in the context of Bangalore, no political party was interested. There's an individual called, I'm not sure how, some of us may know, there's an individual called PG Bhatt, who has done such a thorough analysis of the Bangalore electoral voter rolls that he could tell you if your name was in 2 places or 3 places. He told me also once, Harish, I think your name is in 2 places, which was true because, where I first registered in my father's house, it was continued to be there despite me moving and despite me asking for, removal. But anyway, now it's done. But there are some regular errors. And another thing we should remember, who conducts the revision of electoral rolls? The Election Commission of India does not do it. It's a supervisory body. It has the statutory authority, constitutional authority to order one. The actual work is done by the revenue officers in each state, not any other officer of the state. Revenue officers in each constituency. So in Bangalore, it will be the revenue officer who is responsible for changing khatas and all of that. The last thing he wants to do is to take a look at the electoral rolls. He's a revenue department officer in the true sense, right? He has got more lucrative activities to focus on. So this is a challenge. And in some of our writ petitions, we had asked for, why don't you change that? Why don't you, for example, ask the postal department, which is far better at tracing somebody to deliver a post. I'm not saying that's a foolproof answer to the problems, but I'm saying there needs to be a multidimensional approach to revising voter rolls. That has not happened. So what we are now seeing in Bihar, I am not surprised. I am actually surprised that it has taken us so long to realize the massive problem we have on our hands as far as electoral rolls are concerned. There's a serious problems. A serious problem in the maintenance of rolls, in the revision, in the almost arbitrary nature in which names are just moved around. And all we know is after every election, there's a story done by every newspaper about how some people couldn't vote. What happens after that? You know, this is a democracy. I am an owner of this country, right? If I am not allowed to vote, you're taking away my ownership right in this country. So how can we enforce that? We can't. And that's the point. We need some solution to that. What that is, I don't know. We have to brainstorm on that. I know time is at a premium. Let me see. I had 2 or 3 more points. So what has the Election Commission done? I think it has done precious little to sort out both the fairness around elections and the manner in which electoral rolls are being revised. And there are now, you know, with so much technology available, there are better tools available. Okay. And the second thing, and you know, one of the incongruous things that came out of this Supreme Court matter, you know, in connection with the Bihar revision, is one, there is no, so I think what was evident, okay, I'll come to the incongruous point later, but what was evident is that it's a circular process. So to prove that you are a voter residing in that area, in that house, you either need, you know, so there were some 12, 13 documents which are, you know, which are there in the list. About 4 documents only government servants can have. So all of us can forget about that. Then, you know, then there is Aadhaar, there is voter's ID card, then a few others, driver's license, other things. And all of them are circular. So when you obtained your Aadhaar card, you had to show either the driver's license or the election commission's voter ID card, EPIC card. Now it's the other way around. If you know, Aadhaar is not good, so show the other one. Who is actually verifying? Nobody is actually verifying. Right? Driver's license, you rely on the telephone bill, electricity bill. So this is, and Aadhaar was and many of us opposed Aadhaar as to, you know, the nature in which it was thrust down everybody's throats. Aadhaar was supposed to be the solution, right, to all of this. Then why is that excluded? If that is a solution, and now we are all living with it, even for bank account they want Aadhaar. But for saying that I live there to get your name on the voter's ID, they say somehow there's something wrong with that. So that is a question of state capacity in terms of what identity that we want to give ourselves. But here it goes deep, much deeper, because you are excluding someone on the basis that he or she doesn't reside there. That's one point. That's like the normal process for revising electoral rolls. That is, you moved somewhere else, you know, you have passed away, whatever, right? But to say you are not a citizen at all on the basis of this rolls is another issue. Anyway, that I don't think is part of this discussion, although it's topical in everybody's mind. But this is the problem with, I come back to this is the problem with litigating elections. We don't have a system where we can go and enforce rights. The only example in which I have been involved, when during elections we were successful in getting some order, was when a candidate in the Bangalore South parliamentary election got a sort of a blanket John Doe order saying no details shall be shown by any media about his life. Right? And then we went immediately, in a PIL we went under Article 227 to the court and said, because there is a mandate by the Election Commission saying there shall be free dissemination of information about every candidate. That's the only time that I am aware of where a court intervened during elections and said, no, you please disclose the information. But that again was not intervening in the electoral process. It was intervening in an order which was initially wrong. So litigation, so to sum up, and I want to stop, I've got a few more points, but we'll come back to it later. Currently, litigation in relation to election is all post facto. It's like a post-mortem. and there are very limited, except for unseating an elected candidate, an elected representative, which courts are very, very reluctant to do because he's, after all, he or she has won a mandate and which needs to be respected. That's something we have to remember. So what is it that we can litigate about? All the developments on disclosure of assets and criminal records have all come because of litigation, have all come because of PILs filed by ADR and PUCL and a couple of other individuals, about 3 or 4 organizations and 3 or 4 entities. There's no gradual increase in terms of scrutiny of the process. So it is a bit of a black box. And that is quite shocking, because this is the fundamental process of democracy. Without elections, and there is no democracy. Well, I mean, Alok rightly said that even with elections there may not be democratic behavior or rights, but we'll leave that to another day, another discussion. I'll stop there and then we'll come back.
So thank you. It's been such a pleasure listening to both of you. So criminality, I think that's one area which triggers all the time, that when we talk in terms of elections, we come to the criminality. So the kind of candidates who are elected, the way the elections are conducted, the means that are employed. There's always debate in this country, and inability of the people to litigate is one of the major concerns. In fact, as you said, the ability to litigate is very, very limited in this country. That's one of the challenges. And the increased criminality in the electoral processes out there, and even whether it's a candidate or the process itself, either of them, both of them, would create an element of fear on those individuals who are able to litigate or open a litigation, the kind of reaction, the kind of challenge that he may have to face for having litigated. We have come across a number of instances at rural areas. In fact, when we look into the litigation at the rural areas, some of them who take it up, they had to leave the village and to go elsewhere. They had to sell their land, they sell their house. This is something that has happened. So that's one of the major challenges that we have, because most of the elections, one of the things which we normally don't talk about is that the caste factor. So election and caste go together in this country. And the votes are decided on the numbers. The candidates are decided on the number of people belonging to his community or caste in that particular constituency. This also creates a kind of an atmosphere for anyone who is not part of that group be able to litigate, though having a good ground to do that. We also see good amount of litigation in the process of election, right from the nomination to the campaign and to the elections. We have this entire thing process which we go through. In fact, the election process, campaign process, a huge number of litigation on criminalities regarding the malpractices. Malpractices is a large part of litigation which is attributable, whether it's alcohol, whether it's money or gifts. Of late it has become more common now. The loads of gifts. And also one of the things which has come forward very interestingly in last a decade or so is storing of these voter cards. That's one of the things which happened in Bangalore. We have an MLA who had 50,000 cards, 1 lakh cards, all of them at his house. So he would call the voter and give it to him and go and vote. So a kind of a challenge that we have found on that kind of the nature of the election is concerned. Why people are able to pledge their card. This is a pledging. They had taken the cards from them for some money. So this is something which happening all over. So there is also one of the aspects which I've seen in last few decades, especially in places like Andhra Pradesh, in Adalwai, that's 2 decades ago, called vote rigging. In fact, I had an opportunity to be in a village in Kadapa district where the election, the voting center was cordoned off by bullock carts cordoned off by bullock carts. The headman of the village could go and vote for all. So all the votes were cast by one family. So there are some 500 votes. He did vote for all the 500. So the nature of elections, as Alok was referring to earlier, is that when you say that how we are conducting elections is still a big challenge. Times have changed. Maybe that we are no more money is involved now, gifts are involved now. We also see the kind of practices in Tamil Nadu. It's one of the cases where I had seen in Ooty once truckloads of televisions prior to elections, truckloads of allegations. I was attending a court in Ooty in a sessions case. I saw nearly some 20, 30 trucks carrying those black and white televisions those days being delivered. This is during elections campaign. Now this is something which is very common in India now, across India. So when we talk in terms of the fairness of election is concerned, sometimes it appears to be a joke. That's one of the challenges that we have. But are we a democracy? Yes, we do have certainly a democracy, a functional one at that. Despite all the challenges, despite all the things, I always reminded of the Voltaire's Jadig, where a prostitute asks a priest that the kind of violence that I've suffered right from my childhood to the present time, there is no possibility of any deliverance. Or is this what kind of world I'm living in? The Padre makes a statement that this is the best of all possible worlds. If at all there is one, this is the best of all possible worlds. I think that's one thing which I relate to when we talk in terms of elections are concerned. The challenges are many, but I also see a positive side which we see today. In the last 2 decades, I see a great amount of discussion, debate, and participation and raising of questions happening across. That's something which is a greater improvement compared to the earlier times. From, say, I'm from 70s, so I've seen these kind of things right from 70s. So I see the change that has happened, that today we are talking more about it. We had no opportunity to open there's no space to express for anyone. And forget the litigation. Litigation is always between the winning and the losing candidate, no one else. Even today, majority of litigation are that, but there are also other litigations which are involved in the process of election is concerned. I think that's some change that we have been seeing here. But the challenges are that litigating elections need to be a process that need to be more spoken about, that's needed. And also, we need to discuss on the subject. For example, the one which are before the court. We also have this tendency when we should not talk about these courts. We always consider it totally sacrosanct. We are not about to say that whatever the Supreme Court said should be the law. And some say that because it's a constitutional mandate that you are not supposed to question the same. So any question is the contempt of court. So the kind of notions that people carry on these subjects and which are being spread, I think that's one of the major challenges that we have. The second part which I wanted to say is that when Alok was referring to was regarding delimitation is concerned. That's one of the major challenges certainly we do have. But I believe that there is a requirement of a rather geographical construct rather than the population construct that is a requirement of representation. That's all subject of debate that's happening across the country. But there is a need that we need to have an equitable representation rather than just based on the numerical strength. The numerical strength certainly is not one suitable for a country like India. And that's one of the major challenges that we have. I think I'll rest now here. I think we'll take forward. Sure.
So thank you, sirs. You've done a wonderful job of dealing with or getting into various aspects of the election and related issues. So good news is that our organizers have said we can go till 6 o'clock. So we've got still time. Anyway, we'll see how it goes around, then accordingly we can decide. So maybe I'll begin with a few questions, what I have noted down. And you can also be ready with your own questions or your own observations and your opinion also, so that the discussion becomes little more interesting. Yes, I think Alok sir was speaking about this aspect of delimitation with regard to where I felt that you were literally contradicting the present mood of the, especially the South, with regard to the fear that is there. No, we are going to lose our no, what you call representation. It will be undermined and all that. So, no, could you please elaborate on this little?
So I think delimitation should always be based on principle. You can have pragmatism to adjust the edges. Two principles inform our delimitation: one person, one vote, and representation for really small minority communities. And minority communities generally is restricted to people living in sparsely populated hill areas with their own culture, with their own language, with their own history and so on. You can't necessarily apply that to southern states because Kerala is a country size, Tamil Nadu is a country size, Karnataka is a country size and so on. When you uphold the principle of one person, one vote, the constituency, number of constituencies will change. And it changes not because anyone is trying to do something wrong, it is just the necessary consequence of demographic change. So, keeping that in mind, you will have to do the exercise first. The fears, according to me, are overblown because we are trying to extrapolate on a line. It's a bit like people extrapolating on a line what India's population will be without taking into account the social and economic factors which might make the population growth reduce. Which, again, see, these are all complex mechanisms. These are not simple, straightforward things. People today, I mean, I'll just give you one example. Everybody says Bangalore's, urban India doesn't vote, right? I think that's untrue because the turnout in urban India is the same as rural Bihar, right? And it's about 45 to 55%. Rural Bihar has improved, in fact. The reason is, very simply, I mean, or rather, why is the turnout low in Bihar? Why is it like urban areas? It's very simply because the size of the constituencies are huge. If you make a list of the top 10 largest constituencies in India by population, most of them will be in North India or they are cities in South India. So, what is really happening is that is the same dynamic. If you are in a very large constituency, no one cares about your vote. Because as a, let's say, candidate in Rajarajeshwari Nagara, the MLA you are referring to, it's easier for me to take your electoral ID card and expect you not to vote than to try and convince you why to vote for me. Right? And that's happening across this country. We imagine that everybody comes out to vote because of a sense of goodness or citizen. No, they don't. Somebody has to convince them why you should vote for me. Because for a majority of this country, going and voting that one day means losing that one day's wages. Right? You are actually taking a hit by voting. If you are living a comfortable life like most of us here, for you voting is a good civic duty. But for a lot of people, somebody has to convince them. Somebody has to tell them, this is for your good, I'll take care of you, I'll do this, I'll do that. But if as a candidate, I'm like, I can't reach out to 1.5 million people. That's ridiculous. That's larger than a lot of countries in the world. If I have to win an election in rural Bihar, if I have to reach out to 1.5 million people scattered in small villages, I will say, forget it. I'll just reach out to 500,000 people. That's enough for me to win. So which means the public's engagement with democracy is reducing because our constituency sizes are too big. What is happening in urban Bangalore and rural Bihar is the same thing. And it's the result of not doing delimitation. Finally, one last point. Tomorrow, if we were to split, and this is my speculation, everybody speculates that yes, if UP and Bihar get 40 more seats, only Hindutvavadi parties will win. Here's my speculation. If you split Bihar into and UP into far more constituencies, we will see the rise of parties that we today don't exist. Because communities which have otherwise been left out of the electoral mainstream will suddenly come into the electoral mainstream. Their votes will be more valuable. Their importance to winning or losing an election will be more important. That's what we are seeing today in UP and Bihar. We are not just seeing 3 or 4 major parties in the fray. We are seeing about 15 to 20 parties. A lot of the parties focus only on the votes of one small subcaste. And they're important because even the parties with only 1 or 2 seats in the Lok Sabha are being accommodated with ministerships. And that's because Political parties have recognized that yes, their votes are important. Imagine if 20 million more people were voting than they are voting today. The effect it will have on our politics is not only in one direction. There are so many different possibilities that we should not worry on those possibilities. Our focus should be on principles. Our focus should be on principles that the value of one person, one vote, or rather one person, one vote, one value should not go down. Because once that goes down, we are fundamentally affected. It no longer is a democracy. It is just people who have money will vote, everybody else, thank you for coming. So that is why I personally fundamentally believe we should have done the limitation 30, 40 years ago. By delaying it till now, we have created this problem. Fixing this problem means we act tomorrow.
And if others want to add or speak more about that also is welcome. Even from the audience also, if you got a counter opinion or adding to that also is possible. So you can just raise your hand.
See,
we'll do
I don't think I agree on most things that Alok said. I don't think we should worry about one state getting more representation in parliament and another state less representation. I mean, you are supposed to, equalize that through the Rajya Sabha, which we have failed to do. We have converted the Rajya Sabha into, just a, I don't know. I don't even know what to call it anymore. It's a rubber stamp comes to mind, but I don't think it's even that, right? Just like, Legislative Council, here, it's such a sad state of affairs. But also, I have another take on that. I mean, Parliament is not functioning, right? It's when was the last time you heard any relevant and important discussion in Parliament on laws, on policies? And it's even worse when it comes to state legislatures. Okay, Parliament at least gets televised. There's some amount of, national media attention. In state legislatures, it's a very pathetic state of affairs. There's no discussion on anything. So, what is it that we are really arguing about is something we need to also keep in mind. But the lower the number of voters in each constituency, democracy gets better. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I remember, when I was a student in England, and at that time they had the rule that if you were from one of the Commonwealth countries and you were living in England, you could vote in the parliamentary election. So I voted in 2 parliamentary elections in England. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who was campaigning on behalf of one of the parties, and she said, "Oh, it's very tiring. We have a very large constituency." And I said, "What's the number of voters?" She said, 25,000. And this is a parliamentary election, right? So the ability to make democracy work means lesser number of people in each constituency. That's when your vote also becomes more valuable. So I think that's an important factor to remember. The other point that I've not really applied my mind, that's why I said I agree with most things Alok said, but on this, complaint of these southern states, I've not really given it much thought, so I won't venture any opinion on that at this stage.
One of the challenges that we have is that the construct of first past the post kind of elections. That's one of the major challenges that we have. Actually, the kind of representation that need to happen, that representative nature is not available. Because of the first past the post, the good amount of criminality that is attributable is also because of the same. Because you are in a race, you are alone. In fact, in the political system that we have, as we started the discussion, that we need to say that anyone who has minimum of 25 crores can talk in terms of making an application to the political party for the seat, for this candidature. Now that's one of the major challenges that we have. Most of the political parties function that way. In fact, I had a well-known journalist who developed an interest in contesting elections. He went and met a very big political leader and president of the party and said that I want to contest from you. I have been such a good journalist, I have such amount of circulation, I'm able to reach people, and people read me in all the constituency which I'm talking in terms of, I can just, these are two constituencies, any one of them I can be a good candidate. So he explained every possible aspect, how he can be a suitable candidate for the party. And the first question that is asked, what exactly is what the kind of money you have in your case? I said, the one thing which I can talk to you is that you need not have that amount of money. In respect to your case is concerned, we can say that, okay, the percentage is that a small one. So that's the way the politics was. This first past the post, there has been a series of discussion on this particular aspect. We follow the parliamentary elections in the way it's done in UK. A good number of Commonwealth countries do practice that. The challenge is that the representation of the political ideologies and parties are extremely limited because of the first past the post. So the whole question we talk in terms of regarding the fear factor relating to the representations, southern state being not represented, there being more representation from the northern state. First past the post may not be the suitable option that we have, and we continue to that's certainly a colonial hangover that we are stuck with. There are many colonial hangover, including our judicial system, which I am part of, all of us are part of. So, but the construct is that the change is needed. There is a requirement of a change in the thought process in that. That's one of the major challenges. Two, in respect of when we were started the election, the role of the election commission was also discussed here. It's a supervisory role. The participation of everyone, the state, and proactive approach is something that need to be put forward. I think in litigation, we should also look at kind of a, how are we looking at, rather than making accusations. One of the major challenges that we have is that we start making accusations that the institution has failed. This institution has failed. So they will attribute that, no, it was not my failure, it is your failure. So the constructs are that we are not addressing the challenge. So addressing the challenges should be only by way of a proactive approach towards the same. I think that's one of the major challenges that we have. Yeah. I believe that delimitation is one part, rather than that we need to change from this first past the post. One man, one vote, one value is equally good in a representative constructive election, not the first past the post. Sure.
Anyone from the, yes, sir, please. Maybe on that particular issue of delimitation.
So, I think on delimitation, so at least I don't think it is at all true that the southern states are underrepresented in terms of their parliamentary voice. In fact, it's quite the opposite, as Mr. Prasanna Kumar has laid out. The demographic transition from then is so huge that if you were to actually do one man, one vote, Tamil Nadu would lose about 20% of their parliamentary representation. So it's definitely not true that the southern states are underrepresented. What is true is this sort of specious argument that has been made on behalf of the southern states that we have succeeded at family planning. A completely specious argument with no basis in social science, right? But the argument was, wait, look, you people, you are breeding like rabbits. We've been successful at family planning. So therefore you should not get to vote. I would not dignify that argument by calling it, I hope you would agree that the social causation of the lack of fertility has nothing to do with actual planning from states, but is entirely a consequence of women's education and women's income levels. And that is why the southern states' fertility has reduced, as it will reduce in the north in the course of the next 5 years. We're already below replacement levels nationally overall. So I don't think that argument exists. In fact, there's no, like Mr. Prasanna Kumar was saying, there's no principled objection that can be made to a delimitation that does one man, one vote, one value. Apart from this sort of fertility argument, I've heard nothing that justifies.
this is, and this is why I think a forum like this is important, because no one made a good constitutional argument when they introduced that amendment in 1976 to say we will freeze the limitation in 1971. The argument is exactly what you said, family planning. There's too much population explosion. And to me, nobody got to the heart of it because it just kind of worked for everyone to stay quiet about it. In fact, if given how our constitutional jurisprudence, and forget jurisprudence, our discourse has evolved, if we have to say that this 42nd amendment is against the basic structure, it will simply be because it's trying to further an objective which our constitution does not believe in. It is doing damage to our democratic structure for an object which our constitution does not believe in. Our constitution does not say that only certain kinds of people have value and certain kinds of people don't have value. So I think the original sin of the 42nd Amendment, which introduced this delimitation problem in India, which was thoughtlessly continued in 2001 if you ask me, 2003 if you ask me, was because it was not based on a good constitutional justification. Yes, there are a lot of amendments which have good constitutional justification. Even they are fairly big changes. And I gave one example. If you want to protect the integrity of the election process, you have to change the way in which election commissioners are going to be appointed. You can't just do it by judgment. I think the reason why southern states used that is because that was the same logic used in 76. And I think people should come forth and say this is not a constitutional argument to make. You cannot say that you are upholding constitutional values if you are making this, because it fundamentally goes against a core constitutional value of human dignity. That in our constitution, every person has worth, every person has value, and we believe that is reflected in the fact that every person, once they turn the age of 18, is allowed to vote. And their vote has value. So I think, just to add to that.
That's perfect on that. But what matters most, why these arguments do come in place, is something comes from the economic development, the security issues, the kind of fear factors, and the ability to have my share of revenues. We are union of states. Each one of us are almost a constituency. We are one state. Because almost each of us are like a nation. And that when you look into the language construct, when you travel elsewhere, you will go to know that each of the state in India is a nation by itself, with its language, culture, the way, the ethos, every part. So given that kind of a construct, these fears are based. So the arguments that people make, they come from very nature which are illogical. In fact, when we say that it's one man, one vote, one value, it's one man, one vote, one value. It can't be anything else other than that. Now, the question here is that rather than how we achieve that, what exactly is that really is where vote getting value? That's something which is the part. With this one man, there's one vote. Is his vote getting that particular value, what he represents, what exactly he's voting for? I think that needs to be one aspect that need to be more thought of. I feel a representative kind of a election, which is the way we are doing it, one past the post, is not one which is suitable towards the same. The value need to be improved. It's only by a representative nature of the political dispensation. The political parties need to be putting forward their values and vote for the party rather than for the candidate. If we were to look into the candidate all the time, we are looking at the one past the post is that many parties, political parties, do not care how you pay, how you spend. They are least bothered. That's one of the major challenges that we have. And it's the money bag concept of the elections comes from that construct. So therefore, the first past the post is something we should always be looking at. So therefore, when we talk in terms of one man, one vote, one value, that value is not being given credence to. That's one of the major challenges that we have.
So there was one more interesting issue that was raised again by Alok sir, that was with regard to the Panchayat Raj elections. Anyone can answer with regard to that. So, no, my point is, should it move out of the state control? Because we are seeing a lot of litigation because the states are not conducting because they have got greater control. it only delays, and there is that whole the aspect of decentralization of power is lost no relevance. So is there any other way of dealing with that whole aspect of control?
See, the 74th and 75th amendments, when they were brought in, I think they're not happily worded. Okay, that entire part is not happily worded. To be fair to the courts, they have said you should conduct elections on time, and they have reiterated it many times. But at the same time, they're happy to make exceptions. So that there, I think, the fault is with the courts also. I don't think there is, this issue. We are seeing this in Bangalore, right? I mean, we have now had 2 legislations in the last, 4 years, and the number of delimitations, God knows how many they are doing. And every party in power thinks when they are, by delimiting or creating different constituencies, they will somehow come to power, right? And this is just making, this is, they think people are fools, right? And to be fair, I mean, we have given them that, that sort of right to feel that way, because we are taking money and, voting. So should it be taken out of state control? I think there should certainly be a clear mandate that elections should happen once in 5 years, just like they happen for assemblies and parliament, right? And in that context, this one nation, one election that's being, there is a lot of problem in that, because Election Commission has been given the power in the draft bill that was circulated, has been given the power to cut short or extend time limits of assemblies. That's a very dangerous power to be given. I don't think that should happen. So fixing time period, clear time periods, it's there actually in the law, it's there, but it's not being done. And just about Bangalore, I mean, the Karnataka High Court actually ordered that elections should be held within a couple of months, but then the Supreme Court stayed that order. So, and then it's just going on and on and on. There is a serious threat to democracy at the the third tier of governance, but that is, I'm less worried about whether elections are conducted than the manner in which those institutions are being manipulated, right? No MLA wants elections, either to the panchayats or to the corporations. He wants to be, so he or she doesn't want to be MLA to sit in assembly and make policy. He or she wants to be CEO of the constituency to do whatever he or she wants. That's the problem, right? That's the warping of the democratic process that has happened, right? And how do you litigate that is another question. We are not challenging the legislations through which more and more across states MLAs are being given executive powers, right? Whether it's with education, whether it's with health. Look at the debate, my constituency is only getting 200 crores to, when it says not to the constituency, it's to them. They want the ability to deal with that money. Okay, that's a different issue altogether. So we'll wait. We'll wait to see what happens. But we have to, the message is we have to be more vigilant in terms of litigation and be aware of it. There are many other challenges to that. So you wanted to say something?
No, just I agree with Harish that I don't think taking it out of the state's hands is the answer. I think you need to make the 73rd and 74th amendments more robust. At least the institutions, they were drafted, as Harish said, in a very slapdash way, which has allowed states to run circles around it. But it's uneven. Like Kerala does a good job, Tamil Nadu does a good job. A lot of states don't do a good job. Ultimately, I think and I pose a simple question. If Karnataka as a whole went without elections, you would be sure people are hitting the streets, irrespective of which political party, except in like supremely exceptional situations. Nobody in Bengaluru is hitting the streets because we haven't had a municipality. And that speaks to not just the election part of it. It's that we've given municipalities responsibilities, but no powers and no resources. So people also know, okay, this is a toy exercise. All right, I'll go and vote. I'll get 5,000. Good for me. I have no expectations from the BBMP to be, or now the Greater Bangalore Authority or whatever authority comes under that to solve any of my problems. I still have to go to my MLA. That is the fundamental problem I think we haven't addressed.
And there is no other municipality in Karnataka that goes through this problem. Bangalore is the one because this is where the resources are, right? There are examples of other municipalities also, but by and large, panchayat elections are being held. There they are dealing with it in different way. They keep changing the powers of panchayats, right? So, you can't, sort of say because of that, let's, take away the power of the state government. There is some logic to, because panchayats are not constituents of the, Republic of India, right? It's union of states, as, Mr. Venkatesh just said. It's so, if it was union of panchayats, then there would be some logic. So I don't think taking away legislative power of the state is a good idea, but there has to be there's no safeguards at the moment.
And also politicizing the whole process, because it's supposed to be apolitical mostly, but now it has become more political, and even panchayats. Yeah, one more. Yes. So anyone from the audience? Yeah, there are many. Yes, please.
I wanted to say, why is this politicization a problem? Mr. Prasanna also sort of said in his opening remarks that his argument is that there is some sort of a fall in public life the way we. Okay.
Sorry, I'll reframe a little bit better what I was trying to say. It's not about a fall in public life, right? Maybe that is happening, but that's a separate issue. For me, the issue is that the political divisions have meant that working together has become harder. Or rather, let me put it this way. You have much deeper divisions effectively where you feel that if I control everything and if I give the opponent any power, they will take away everything from me. Not mentioning any specific party or anything like that, because it's basically how people think. When you get two groups where it's a winner takes all, you will ensure that I don't want to give the other guy a chance again ever to come back to power. That's not how constitution is supposed to be framed or fixed. When the constitution was framed, even though there were multiple parties, the Congress party was still so dominant. There were different parties, different ideologies. The expectation was that whoever comes to power will still think of the nation in a larger way and not just worry about the next election. That has changed. We cannot change people's minds about it. We can't tell politicians, please think differently. What we can do is design institutions which work around this. Which work around it to say, we will force you to work together. Because whoever tries to meddle with something when they're in power will face the same problem next time. Not because someone is trying to do something to you, right? Again, I don't think it's a bad thing that we have political parties across different ideologies, very opposed to each other. Some may be closer to each other, some may be much further apart from each other. That's natural for a country of this level of diversity, this level of differences. It's good we have a wide spectrum of political parties. What is bad is the differences prevent you from working together when needed. And when that is needed is these kinds of institutions. CAG is not there to say one party is better than the other party. CVC is not there to indict some politicians and not other politicians. Likewise, Election Commission isn't there to help some political parties versus other political parties. This is why we need to rethink. And I would put even the judicial process into this place. Right? When political parties want an insurance against losing an election that we have judges favorable to our ideology in the Supreme Court or in the High Court, they fundamentally destroy the integrity of the judiciary. That's unfortunately what has happened in the past, what's happening today. So my point is not that politicization is bad or any such thing. When it affects that ability of an institution to work as intended per the constitutional mandate, when it becomes just a tool for whoever is in power to achieve their ends, that is when our constitutional design is failing.
On this point, no, I said actually we were on 5:45.
So I have an open-ended question to all the panelists. So basically in this session we have discussed a lot about the use of funds in elections, a lot of which are unaccounted funds, or to bluntly put it, black money. So you have said that politicians are spending upwards of 25 crores even in MLA elections. So also there are other ways in which they are motivating voters, such as freebies and stuff, which are again not permitted. So when all of this is happening, why is there not a conviction from the Election Commission of India to put a stop to this when laws exist against this? And also, you as lawyers, how do you go about litigating such issues which are very complex in nature? There's a lot of political pressure, even if against the lawyers themselves, when they go against major political candidates who are doing this. So how do you go about litigating such issues?
So, see, the problem is the Election Commission doesn't have a full-time, large machinery to process the convictions. So what happens is, and this is what Mr. Venkatesh also was referring to, alluding to. So during elections, so you read during that 3-week period, you see a lot of cash seizure, you see a lot of liquor being seized, some freebies being seized, and all of that, and cases are registered. Cases are registered by the local police. In that at that time during the elections, there is an officer who is reporting directly to the Election Commission. But that stops as soon as the election is over. Then the responsibility to take forward those cases are with the state government. And if cases are against their own political parties, they just let it slide. Okay? They don't necessarily close it immediately, but they let it slide. Or because this time this political party has won, next time the other party may win. So they don't pursue against each other parties. Tacit understanding that all cases that are filed, FIRs are created during the election process for seizure of cash, etc., it's not pursued. That is what's happening. And that individual lawyers are not, and citizens are not able to pursue that, because only the state governments pursue that. And whether it's central elections or state elections, this is the problem. That's the first challenge. So we need to find an independent machinery to take that to the logical conclusion. Maybe time limits, maybe who has control of that litigation, all of that. But there are challenges. The judiciary is overburdened, it doesn't have time. These look very, very minor. Judges are dealing, between a murder trial and this one, what will a judge do, right? So he or she makes that choice. So there are problems there. Then the other thing is income tax officials who can actually do something, right? About how is it that a candidate, or on behalf of a candidate, so much money is being spent. Nothing is done, right? Again, the only organization that believes clean money is being spent is the income tax department during elections. Nobody else. Everybody else knows the truth. So institutions are aware of this problem. And I want to go back to what Alok mentioned in his opening remarks. Courts are also becoming pragmatic rather than principle-based. This is an issue on which principle should take precedence over pragmatism. Courts cannot be pragmatic in terms of elections, right? It hurts the core of the country, the core of the legal process, the core of the electoral process, the core of the judicial process. Everything is rolled into democracy, right? And courts are not... the moment they bring in pragmatism to democratic issues in terms of voting rights, in terms of the process of elections, the conduct of the process of elections, I think that's a very, very slippery slope, and we are now, sliding very quickly.
One aspect I would like to add to it is that we have this, in Bangalore, minimum litigation is 3,000 cases. I'm talking I am at a very, very lower scale. I'm not looking at that one. 3,000 cases per judge. And he can hardly, every day, 250 cases are called and adjourned. From when the court opens and by the time the call work is over, he would have spent nearly half the day. Half the day is spent in calling the work and adjourning the cases. So he hardly examines 4 or 5 witnesses in a day. So any litigations which of nature, he looks at litigations that are important. These litigations, witnesses never turn up. Police are not keen because, as he said, that the ruling party, if it's against one candidate from the ruling party, the state would not be interested in it. The police, jurisdictional police, would not be interested in it. Because it's the jurisdictional police of that constituency who have to conduct the case against him. Who would not take that kind of chances. So these cases normally die their natural death of not being prosecuted. Some day that the witnesses have not come, the cases are closed. Nobody even knows and nobody even cares about these litigations. That's the reality. So the question here is that how are we to litigate this is at a different level unless we have a much more stronger presence and stronger our ability being strengthened in litigating these elections. That's something which is needed. By making some statements, state does the same, I don't think it will happen. If at all there is some changes that we are looking at, the very fact that we are having a debate here with all of us is because some of them have thought it's wise to seek the court and ask for answers. So, however, the questions, challenges that exist in respect of the decisions taken by the court, but there is an effort towards that end. I think that's the progress we should look from. I think we need to do more on that. People who are aware of their rights, people who are concerned about their rights, who are concerned for others' rights, I think they are the people who need to start talking about it. I think there is a larger debate that needs to happen. I think these are the kind of spaces. In fact, Alok said that in the beginning, that these debates are necessary. These kind of debates are necessary. We should be in a position to come, and a healthy, constructive debate is needed, wherein that while I may not agree with what Alok says, or Harish may not agree with what I say, we have the space to say and put forward our ideas. That something is needed. I think that's where a democratic construct comes from. I think that's how we should look at it. I think I would like to end the answers.
One is the justice aspect. Now, for example, we have the Chandigarh mayor election with the vote there. And again, the recent, last week or so, in Haryana, one Panchayat.
They may be restrained in sensitive cases. I won't go into that. But the question you are asking is the time taken to decide cases regarding elections. See, we can't look at it in isolation. The judiciary is burdened, right? So no case in this country gets decided any time before 5 years minimum. No case, right? And that is only at one court. I'm not talking about appeal levels and all that, right? So there are exceptions, but exceptions prove the rule, but exceptions are based on the type of cases. But on an average, if you are litigating your rights in a case, you should assume 5 years, right? So we can't treat, and that I don't want to digress into judicial processes and judicial reforms, but I'll stick to answering this. We can't treat election cases as a separate bucket and say, tell the judiciary, now you deal with it. That's what we have tried to do. We have tried to do with, there are fast track courts, there are special courts, now there are special courts for elected representatives. So any criminal cases against some of these people also comes to that court. You can't treat it in isolation. You have to, it sounded good when it was brought in, okay, that why should corruption cases against elected representatives languish for years together? By that time he or she has become irrelevant. So 20 years, 30 years, that politician has become irrelevant, right? But the problem is, unless you fix the entire system, you can't try to fix only specific types of cases. That's some tinkering. So because a touch point is there with If you find a sector which does not have any touch points with the rest of society and the rest of the judiciary, then you can do it. Sort of one example you can take is tax cases. You can say that the ordinary civil judiciary does not have too many touch points with that. If you create a separate track, in which we have done, income tax tribunal, or then it works. But even there, the experience is not as if it gets done in 1 year. I mean, it takes enormous number of years, because the ultimate appeal is again with the Supreme Court, and there is an appeal to the High Court as well. So there is a problem, but that problem has got to do with the judicial process. I'm not saying judges, I'm saying judicial process. And judicial process reforms is a conversation that its time has come, and it needs to happen much more widely than we are currently debating. Yeah, so we can't, there is a problem there. So we can't create a special electoral litigation process. We can't, because then you need to appoint like a completely new set of judges only to deal with that. And then there will be some, small case, like, one criminal case pending. So let's take an example. If you accuse a winning candidate of having spent more money, and there are 20 cases filed in the, against his or her supporters in the ordinary criminal courts, then one can legitimately take the view that, listen, let those cases be decided first, whether money has been spent on my behalf or not, before you decide against me. Then 5 years are over. So that's the challenge. So we'll have to think through this a little bit more.
So at the very outset, thank you, sirs, for enriching our minds on this burning contemporary issue. One thing throughout the talk, that one question that kept on running in my mind was about judicial proactivism. Means, of course, during election, when all the institutions are complicit, at least judiciary being a free institution, independent, how can it become more proactive and try to uphold the integrity of election, was what I was just thinking about. And of course, you, during the course of your answers, you mentioned that they're already overburdened, and that must be one of the reasons. Another question that I wanted to ask is, when Mr. Harish, you were speaking, you mentioned about public activism, when people begin to question some irregularity, or when they file a complaint or things. But my personal view is, I feel, especially in the local setup, when people find some irregularity against a particular candidate, and if they want to raise their voice, I think that voice is stifled because of a number of fears. I don't want to mention why, but then of course there are a lot of fear. This fear factor is something that stifles the voice of even someone who wants to speak. But that is on the other side. But there are people, like, for example, there's one activist, Mr. T.J. Abraham, if you've heard of. He has been for donkey's years been advocating for rights and against corruption. But it's only he's been advocating and advocating. It has not reached a conclusive end or a logical end. In that regard, I feel the ray of hope is BPAC, of course, which you're a member of. How can BPAC be even more effective? Because of course, we see a lot of irregularities with elections happening over and over. Every time there is an election, there's something that's going wrong. But how can people approach BPAC, or how can BPAC also help people raise their voice against these irregularities that happen?
So I'm not a member of BPAC anymore. I mean, just to clarify that. But I was giving an example of the idealism that prompted trying to cleaning up the election system. And there are many other organizations, like ADR, for example, Association for Democratic Reforms, has done the best work, excellent work, right? If there's an example of, just ordinary citizens just taking up a cause and, trying to take it to some conclusion, that's an example. And there are many others, I'm just giving, in this context, I'm giving you ADR's example. But see, the two words, I think, what you said, I don't think the judiciary is complicit in diverting or electoral process. I don't think that's the message that any of us gave, but so that's a wrong message to take. What we are saying is, the judiciary is not able to respond to the challenges that the current electoral process is throwing up, because the challenges are far too many. and to ensure that elections are held in time and in a time-bound fashion. The powers of the judiciary to intervene during the election process has been taken away. It's only post facto that you can do it. And post facto analysis always has a challenge. Okay, because you are now talking about unseating someone who has won a popular mandate, which is not easy, which can lead to many other problems. If the judiciary starts to constantly unseating elected representatives, that can lead to other sort of problems. That's why it's an extremely tightly regulated and technical litigation. Drafting an election petition is one of the toughest tasks for a lawyer, because there are a lot of procedures around it. It's not like drafting any other plaint. So it's very technical, you have to identify clearly and all of that. Because, you can't overturn a popular mandate easily. Okay, there has to be, and it can lead to other consequences of that. The second point is in terms of, again, not in maybe directly relevant to this discussion, but you said, how long should one fight for rights? Forever. Forever. And as young lawyers, never mistake this. Democracy will only survive if there is constant vigilance. There is no other way out. Okay, so there have to be successive generations. I mean, the generation in the 1900s fought for the democratic independence. So then there was a generation later on which fought against the emergency. Then there's a generation. So this needs to happen constantly, right? That's why there are rules. That's why there are rights, and that's why there is a vigilance on rights. So there's no conclusion. There may be conclusion in individual cases, but there's no okay, now it's done. I think maybe in some other context, I think we probably believed that in 1947 now that it's done, we'll all be clean, and it's shown right in the last 75 years that it's not as simple as that. It's every day you have to fight.
See, we are a common law country, so the common law makes it a structural situation. So it has to function according to that. So when we talk in terms of every time we talk a separate wing and all that, you are always trying to push the thing that how are we to introduce a civil law processes into a system which we are common law country. So common law is robust, good, and it really has brought in a great amount of, if India has served as democracy, I attribute great degree to the common law practices that we have had. Common law that we follow in this country has contributed greatly towards that. That also has a challenge. See, we have an expectation, unlike other countries, that we expect for everything court need to be the final arbiter. That should not be the case. Court should not be the final arbiter for each and every aspect of life. It's only on certain aspects which are necessarily to be dealt by, shall be dealt with the thing. So therefore the constructs are different. So our expectation, with the moment we talk in terms of court, we always talk that the court has panacea for everything. I think that tendency to think the accountability that need to be built into the systems, into the institutions, over a period of time, in a very through a proactive approach. I think that's the way forward, rather than every time knocking the door of the court and give me a solution to each and everything problem that I have. I think that's the way we should look at.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I come from almost a remote panchayat from Kerala. And then recently I went for my verification to add my name in the voters list. I gave the person my Aadhaar card. He told, give me a ration card. I asked him, is this not enough? He jokingly said, who knows, 50 persons might come in your same address. How do I know whether you're on? He was joking. This aside, when one says that we should reduce the number of seats in a state like Kerala, are we forgetting that numbers do work magic in the parliament? Especially considering we have the recent election where people have booked chartered flight to just come and vote in Kerala. Or let's compare, I'm not being harsh, but then let's compare the remotest village of different states. Considering Kerala, one can even say that the quality of election and voting is par almost par as an urban city. How true can that be for a state like Bihar or UP? Considering the numbers, like Kerala has 20 number of seats for MP, while a state like UP has in hundreds, to be precise, 111. So it's the basic lesson which I was being taught, that quality always defeats quantity. The government should always work rather to develop the quality of the election voting, which it already follows for 78 to 79 years, rather than completely shifting or just increasing the numbers. I think that might actually works better than just changing the system itself.
So, yeah. Yeah. There's a popular adage which says that in a democracy, voters choose the government. In a dictatorship, the government chooses the voter. No, we can't. There is no such thing as quality of a voter. Every voter is the same. There are differences. It is the one place in India where people experience something resembling equality. You know that whether you're in rural Bihar or whether you're in urban rich Bombay, you still have to stand in line for the vote. That is the one only thing in this country where you will actually experience equality. So that we cannot do away with. And when we tell that person that because you're in Bihar, your vote counts less, it's not the same thing. So my point is always this. Don't think in terms of states. States are fictional entities. What is Kerala? It's a name on a map, right? It's lines. But who votes? It's not Kerala which votes. It's the individuals who vote. And those individuals are the ones who at the end of the day make or break the democracy. States are parts of the constitution. They have state governments are parts of the constitution. They're elected in a certain way. They function in a certain way. None of which is possible without that average person in this country going every 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, whenever, to go and vote. And the moment we start telling that person, your vote doesn't matter, your vote is useless, somebody already voted in your name, this thing will fall apart. It doesn't matter what level of economic development, how many bridges or how many bullet trains we build. It's not going to hold together if we do not have the average person in this country believing that their vote matters. So that is the lesson that I want everyone to take away.
No, I think I have nothing to add.
So I would say that the construct of elections, we cannot universalize it. The major challenge that we have is that the state elections have their own dynamics, the union elections have their own dynamics, and the representations, the value of representation change on either situation. That's something which we all should know. Value of the vote is not changing. Each one man, one vote, one value. That one person, one vote, one value is assured in any of these constructs. What makes the situation is that each of the state has its own aspirations. It's not that we look at the universal construct. But when you look into the way elections are conducted, the way the person's value is, the vote is valued, I think that's something which is very important. So therefore the construct of one past, the first past the post elections are certainly not one which are really getting that amount of value. So whenever we talk in terms of this, it always comes down to the value of the vote, the representation that we have, the quality of representation, the candidate that we are choosing. It's for example, today none of us can contest for elections. We can't. There's no remote possibility that any one of us can contest for elections. That's the very clear reality. It can happen only when there is a representative process of elections, where the political party is coming to. There's always an argument that is put forward. There are a million political parties. How are you going to make it? But there is already democratic parties which are there, that so many parties which do not get such number of votes will not get a seat. That's as simple as representation in that. And that kind of change need to happen. So long as we are not looking for adding that value to the vote, so this debate continues. But this need to, we cannot say that we'll come to this particular discussion after this change happens. That's stupidity. We have to live with the present situation. We have to ask questions. We need to keep asking questions and trying to find solutions. Thank you.
So finally we come to the end. Now we have vote of thanks.
The root of all goodness lie in the soil of appreciation for goodness. Plato, the Greek philosopher. Good evening, everyone. Respected dignitaries and beloved participants who are gathered for today's panel discussion on the topic litigating elections in India. It has been an honor to have each of you on our panel today on the discussion on embracing public legal awareness and access to thoughtful legal discourse over constitutional challenges. On behalf of everyone present, I wish to thank our panelists of their engaging and insights, especially Alok Prasanna Kumar, the founder of Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy, Dr. Harish Narasappa, the senior advocate and founder of DAKSH and Samvad Partners, B.T. Venkatesh, senior advocate and founder of the ReachLaw, and Father Gerald D'Souza, the director of St. Joseph College of Law, and the moderator of the section, Father Harry Terry, the faculty and finance officer of the St. Joseph College of Law. The contributions of the panelists have truly enriched our discussion and provided much food for our thoughts for our audience. Also, special thanks to the Bangalore Legal Forum who organized the event to foster the legal knowledge, sharing and collaboration. Lastly, sincere gratitude to the audience as well as the participants from Manipal Law School, National Law School of Indian University, St. Joseph College of Law, who put their time and effort into the event. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to our audience to make this an engaging and successful event. We look forward to see you at the future events. Thank you. Also a small announcement, the refreshments are arranged in the ground floor near cafe. Thank you.